Racism in football, as I see it personally, is the bias exercised by one party against another. If you ask about racism colour specific, so in other words, you nigger, you woke, you black bastard, anything wherein one might ask, if somebody called, I remember the first time somebody called me a black bastard, and I asked him, what is the noun and what is the adjective in that statement that you've just made? I'd like to tell you I got an answer, but of course this was way beyond this ignoramus's understanding. He was just repeating parrot-like, a way of arresting progress that he perceived I was going to make. Maybe in that I was better than him, because nobody ever said it believing themselves to be better. If you believe passionately you are better than somebody else, you don't need to insult that person, because you revel in the glory that is yours. As a black person growing up in the United Kingdom, I am inherently African, even though on my mum's side, my grandfather was of Brazilian extraction. His father was an indentured labourer who worked on the construction of the Panama Canal, and then of course was freed to go and do. My grandfather made his way to England. At this time, my dad was in the RAF, and from thousands of miles apart, him and my mum were coming together. They married, they had 11 amazing children. I'm the fourth of them, running in years. My dad always told me, the first day I went to school, you are a black man. No, Dad, I'm a boy. I never said that to him, because you don't answer your dad back. I'm 5 years of age. You are a black man when you go to school. If anybody asks you, where you're from, you tell them Africa. If they know Africa, you tell them you're from Guinea-Bissau. If they know Guinea-Bissau, tell them Karom is a greeting, traditional, I'm a Manjaka. Karom, Ulef, These were the greetings. I thought, I never dared say this to him. What? The other children are going to school, they give them an apple and tell them to go with the teacher, they're crying and all that. Me, I just went to school. So from the first day, I knew who I was, and I was fearless. I happened to run faster over 5 yards, 5 meters, than anybody. And I loved football. So I could play football. I was blessed I had an ability to play it. My dad didn't understand it. And when I was on the pitch, nigger, hey, stop the darkie, oi, Sambo. Did these people hate me and despise me? No, you know what they were trying to do? Stop my progress. Stop my progress. Were these people that would go, were these same people who would go to the hospital and say, I don't want a black doctor to touch me? No, we were long past those days. When they respected you in your professional positions, but anything else, you were a threat. A man who could never aspire to being a member of the medical profession will never insult the medical profession. But when he sees a guy who appears to have no special qualities, he will denigrate anything and everything about that person. So within football, and experiencing on a professional level and seeing the rise of the black man in this country, and I'm not so naive to go with what everybody says in England. Oh, you know, Albert Johansson was the first black player to play in an FA Cup final. My greatest friend, and sadly is lost to this world, Laurie Cunningham, who probably was the finest skilled footballer, period, we've ever had in this country. Ever. He was the first Englishman to play for Real Madrid. But you look at things and you try to get heroes. I remember going to the library as a kid and reading about the player, perhaps I mispronounced his name, Isabelino Gradin, who was a black man who played for Uruguay. Uruguay, of course, were the first country to win the South America Championships. I think they call it Copa America now. And this guy who finished as the tournament's leading scorer, just amazing, you know, was brought up in the slums of Penarol. I think Penarol was his first guy. It was an amazing character. This is the guy who was iconic to Pelé. His team won the the Uruguayan championships, and the whole team went to the hospital bed where he was. He was dying in hospital, and to greet him and bring their celebration. And 4 days later, he died. It's a tragic story, but here was a man, you know, who became an icon. There was another black player who played in the same team, I think Andrade. This guy was also the 100 meters, 400 meters champion of Uruguay. I think he won the South American championships in 400 meters. He refused to go to the Olympics in protest. He sided with, even though the Uruguayan Federation had honoured him and fought against racism, I think they won the 1916 championships, and then they agreed to play Uruguay, and he was stoned. Can you believe this? The Uruguay played Argentine. The Argentinians stoned him, and they had a 2-game fixture they'd already agreed, so he had to play in the second. This is despicable. This is despicable. In this country, we talk about people threw bananas on the pitch or made monkey noises or whatever. I left school to go to play football at West Ham. At the time, we had a player, Clyde Best, John Charles, Clive Charles, Adi Coker. You know, did I experience racism? Well, you better believe I did. And so the game today, it's there. We've never had, and what I demand, you know, in this country we have this nonsense, kick out racism, these ineffective, just stupid nonsense. What we need in this country, and I know, you know, I was the first black football agent in here. I'm saddened to know that I am still probably the most effective black football agent 25 years later. It was myself that first got black players together so they could talk to each other. What are they going to talk about? How much are you earning? That's a good shout, because they were all grossly underpaid. Grossly underpaid. And now, when one stops to look, you mustn't be angry. But when we have nonsense like we experienced here with the Everest situation, with the Suarez is a great player. But look, without Gradin, where was his legacy? Where was his legacy? If you go back far enough, you were black. You know, do people understand, for example, that prior to the 1930, Brazil never allowed black people to play for them? They never allowed, and this is a time, cross-comparison, the English cricket team were so proud and biased, yet in the colonies, like for example the West Indies, there were no black players playing. They weren't allowed to play. At the time, this was uniform. It was all so wonderful and friendly. But when you stop and you look and you try to analyse and say, what is missing? What is missing? Trevor Brooking, who was at West Ham the same time as I was, sits there in this exalted position, nobility. Excuse me, Trevor, are you trying to tell me that you and your selective hearing never heard any racial insult? Because what I want you to do, Trevor, I don't expect you to come up there and say you called someone a monkey or a baboon, but I want you to go up and say, I heard it. I heard it. And my way of helping this was to say, don't take any notice. And here is the problem. When people fail to take notice, there's a famous English saying, probably stolen from somebody more eminent, which says, all it takes for evil to succeed is for enough good men to do nothing. And that, I have to say, is the real problem here. We do not have enough good men doing the right thing. Right now we're bricks. We as blacks are building buildings very high. There's no mortar in between. Mortar is a mutual thing. It bonds and binds the bricks. And with those bricks, you build them on a solid foundation, you can build as high as you like. We don't have that. And that's, I think, what we have to strive for. I'm a huge critic of FIFA. I am. You know, FIFA is another organisation that kind of looks at the 53 countries, 54 countries that make up Africa, as basket cases, as charity cases. I'll just give them a little of this. Where is the real progress? Where is the real progress? Where, for example, accelerated learning? Why are there not fully FIFA-funded academies? You know, maybe 10 in North Africa, 10 in Central Africa, 10 in West Africa, 10 in East Africa, and 10 in... Why are they not there? Why? You know, for the good of the game. And when those players come into these academies, they come in to attain a standard. Every single day, even every minute, every hour, as we're talking now, players are being discarded. Players are retiring. You know, we're now seeing, for example, Patrice Evra is now going to move from the great Manchester United to somewhere where he'll go and spend 4 or 5 years, by the grace of God, weaning down his career. I hope there's more highlights in it. You know, we look at Kolo Touré in a similar situation. They're moving away from it. You know, Samuel Eto'o. But these people are going to be lost to the game because they're not qualified to become coaches. Yeah, and the guys who couldn't even lace their boots are now moving into senior positions as decision makers. And racism persists because of a lack of education. You know, when you look at now what the economic force football has become, you realise that we are now becoming financially disadvantaged. The decision-making process is being made by, let me not just single out Trevor Booking, but let's look at Alan Pardew at Newcastle. Has he ever stood out from the pack and said, I heard it. I played with Ian Wright and Mark Bright and Tony Finnegan and Andy Gray and John Solarco in that team, and I heard it was disgraceful. It was disgraceful. So racism is allowed to persist, perhaps in the same way as cancer may be suiting the companies that have the drugs to end cancer tomorrow morning. Even the research, if you threw billions, hundreds of billions at cancer research, cancer would be over maybe in 4 months, maybe in a year, but it certainly wouldn't take any longer than that. But the fact of the matter is, it suits people. And we know this and we understand. It suits people for racism to persist, in my view, because that puts us, you are either the best a la Didier Drogba, or you are just talented, you know, and who comes under the realm of being just talented? You may be Danny Welbeck. You may be a French-speaking, Senegalese, Cote d'Ivoirian, you know, Mauritanian, Malian, whatever, who has, via Brussels or Paris, made their way here, you know, and trying to find your feet, you make a couple of mistakes, the vitriol is given out, people with spit hanging out their mouth, screaming at you. And yet when the whistle goes, they walk out the ground, I'm not a racist. I'm not a racist. This is what we have to put out. And until the right people, right-minded people, are in a position, until people stand up to do things, we're going to have these problems. In this country, we had for years and years and years and years, decades and decades, we had no black members of parliament. We then set out with black sections to investigate the problem internally. And a result was that in one election, we had the late and sorely lamented Bernie Grant. We had Paul Boateng, of course, who's of Ghanaian origin. We had Diane Abbott, and we had Keith Vaz, who was of Asian extraction. And suddenly, things from a political standpoint of view started to change because we were listening to black perspectives and black viewpoints. So why don't we have, for example, a black players' union? Why? What's there to fear? It creates a better understanding. It really, really does. You know, and you don't go in one colour and come out another colour. You know, there are issues that need to be debated internally. And if there is no need for it, then in 6, 7 years down the road, it will just dissipate. And for me, I don't understand. Look, when I was a kid, it was simple. You went to a Catholic church or you went to a C of E, and obviously, or you were Jewish. Now, today is the Seventh-day Adventist, the Methodist, the Pentecostal, the Salvation Army, the Church Army. Everybody's in there, whatever you want to do, as well as the Hindus. And so what I'm trying to say, sections are there. You don't need to fear them. And if they're not racist of essence, if you had black sections, you don't have to be black to come in there. It helps from a contribution point of view. But if you're white and you want to come and sit down and get involved, go and do it. No one's saying to you, otherwise that's, I wouldn't say it's reverse racism, but it's parallel racism. But, we can talk forever and ever. It's about action. It's not going to end tomorrow or next week. It will end through education. Education comes from truth and reconciliation. When people go, I would never have believed that. I would never have believed that. Or even to say to myself, oh my God, I am acting like a racist. This is beyond the social bias of I'm an Arsenal fan and I'm insulting a Tottenham player. This vitriol. Education teaches us this. I was born and raised in this country. I'm a Mandako, I'm a Guinean, I'm an African. And I am now, I always will be. My children will bury an African when it's my time to pass on from this world. But it may well be that those people who are burying me look as white as Father Christmas. It may well be, and they are my direct descendants, because the education doesn't come to tolerance. It isn't about tolerance, it's about understanding. You can't cure something unless you know the ills of it. As our fathers taught us, when we did something wrong, you are going to get punished because you did something wrong. If you tell me the truth, the punishment will be less, but the lesson will be as great. So now make up your mind, and I will know whether you're lying. Remember, in the John Terry case, his number one ally was Ashley Cole, who gave evidence which was detrimental to the prosecution on behalf of Anton Ferdinand. And this is here. This is a country. If I lived in the middle of Ouagadougou in Burkina Faso, I'm more likely to know what real racism is than I am if I live in London. London's obvious. You're on here, you can get to a big level before you encounter racism. You go far enough, you'll find it. Taxi driver, you cut him up or say, you black bastard, and then he gets back, composes himself, and there's no black bastard. He just gets on it. And if somebody said to him, I thought I saw you today and you could, don't know what come over me. I don't know what come over me. I'm not racist. Some of my best friends are black. I let my kids play with black kids. And when they come in my house and they use the plates, I wash them up and put them away. I don't throw them in a dustbin. I'm being sarcastic in saying this. But this is what we have to overcome. And then as a lack of education, what about those black people who say, oh, I never encountered racism. I've never been. Do you know there is not a single black person who is beyond the age of entry into school who has not been subject to racism? It's impossible. It's impossible. Bias, racism is endemic. And how about being a footballer? What about the selection process? How do we go to that? We talk about, the incredible Pele, and we talk about, the 58 World Cup in Sweden where he came in. 28 years before that, you couldn't play for Brazil if you were black. The depth of racism in that country. The perception of Brazil is just this is a wonderful country, big carnival, which probably takes place, I don't know, for a week in a year. So everything's a fusion of colours and this, that and the other. And yet to be light-skinned in Brazil is a lot better than being like I am. That's 100% for sure. So we have racism overt and we have racism endured. Now people are recognising bigger issues. They're being reported back here, that we don't have this, we don't have that. No, people are recognising here the world's cameras are focusing on us. Let's say it as it is. Let's tell the truth. Some years ago, we had the problem with the Dutch football team. You know, where the players who'd come from, you know, the Dutch islands, going back to colonialism, who now seem to produce footballers, you know, at prodigious rates, and yet they felt in a country that's perceived to be the most friendly of European countries, Holland, there was this phenomenal racial bias against players of colour, black players. It's one of those things we see, and yet the king country of racism, Belgium, you know, which was once upon a time the country that made the Congo, Belgium Limited, under King Leopold, and this ridiculously celebrated Stanley, who was sent to go and find Livingston on a commercial enterprise. We look at things, and now you look at the Belgium team, and they're now black players coming. Look at Lukaku, for example, making up a sizable amount of the Belgian team. You know, there's been improvement. I don't know what's happened because no one is citing this case and reporting it back. My personal opinion, they should be doing. We should be looking and noting the progress which is being made. I'd like to see the Burkina Faso team with a white guy in the team. I really would like to see. Then I know there are no problems, because the reverse is also a problem. And if we're going to get rid of racism, we need to get rid of it. We need to get away this fundamental disequilibrium that exists between chance and opportunity. And the only way we can do that, again, is by education. And these players that we have today who are prominent players, get up and say what it is. Get up. Bob Marley said it. Get up, stand up. Stand up for your rights. Don't give up the fight. It's no good like Sol Campbell running afterwards because he has a book to sell. And I am a critic of his. You know, this big, huge symbol of blackness that Sol Campbell is. Why didn't he say anything when he was playing football? Why did he not say it when he was playing football? You know, most of the major black players that have left the game of this country, I know, I had association with in some way or the other. And when you look at it, you have the great Cyril Regis, Garth Crooks, John Fashioner, you know, Ricky Hill, Paul Ince. Paul Ince is a great case. I represented Paul Ince from a small boy. And, of course, Paul played for West Ham, which is your traditional Londoner, Cockney, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And it's also a bastion of racism. You know, the National Front managed to get its claws into people and manipulate them so that they were, A, inherently antisocial, but more importantly, overtly racist. And when Paul Ince played for them, go on, Paul Ince, is going to be great. Paul Ince left West Ham because, let me say, they sacked the person who was the father figure he didn't have a dad, the father figure in his life, the West Ham manager, John Lyall. So he said, in loyalty, I'm not staying there. I'm not staying there. And of course, he was later said to have worn a Manchester United shirt in blatant disregard for West Ham. It wasn't. It was simply because the picture was going to be taken and put on file. He was going to Manchester United. And because of medical reasons, it didn't work out. So now they sent these things, I hate you, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, etc., etc., etc. Because of the players that I represented and also networked with, we took on the media perception of it and we won. When I said at a press conference, when he signed for Manchester, he will become England's first black captain. They laughed. You can go in the libraries and read it. This is ridiculous. You know, who is this player? He's barely a youth player. How is this possible? But it became true. When I said Ellery Hanley, the greatest rugby league player this country's ever had, will become Britain's rugby league captain, they laughed. Linford Christie will become British athletics captain. That we will see black players playing cricket for England, and Norman Cowans then came into play. But I feel cheated. I feel I was involved and immersed, so I could see what was going to happen. I could see what was going to happen. When players were earning £15,000 a week, and I predicted a player will earn £100,000 a week in the not too distant future. And I will say in front of this camera, we are 3 seasons away from the first €1 million a week footballer. You know, I don't have to hope that that's a black player. I hope it's a footballer. But that will happen quicker than racism will be eradicated from football. It will. And here we are going to the redneck racist country, nation of all, which is Russia. And after that, guess what? We got the slave masters, you know, now looking in UAE and Qatar, in those areas where we're only good for our physical worth. And let's be honest, that's exactly, we will know when we have this equilibrium of opportunities for managers, trainers, coaches, scouts. That's when we'll know. Not when we're the oddity. Isn't it strange that as I'm talking to you now, every black manager playing in the championship has been sacked. We have 0, nil. We do not have any. None, not one single manager, coach, trainer, first team is in the English game. To my mind, that's deplorable. You know, we go now into our universities, we have black professors, dons, and everything else. We go into the banks, we go into the seat of industry. You know, on a socio-economic scale, you know, blacks are quite clearly now really, really prominent in the A to C in terms of identifiable net disposable incomes. You as a black person, let me make you laugh, I can go into a bank now and get a debit card. I can actually go and get a credit card. 25 years ago, they wouldn't even listen to you. Unless you were depositing money at the same time. What do you want a bank account for? It's all about material wealth. Black players, unless you are of some use, forget about it. It's not going to happen. The only thing that's changed is we actually got better. That's all. So they've been forced to take black players on. You know, let me say this. I've known Ian Wright since he was a little boy. And he's a wonderful, wonderful person. I've known Ryan Giggs since Ryan was Ryan Wilson. You know, his father was from Sierra Leone. And trying to talk to people and get them to understand the importance of heritage. You know, if your national team is of any good, of course you'll be of renown. People will know who you are and what you are. But where we have things at the present moment here, players come into a team. Let's go back to those 70s because people like talking about it. And I know because I played football in the 70s. Now, players like, I remember going to Stoke and seeing this amazing player, Garth Crooks. It was amazing. Latterly, everybody, for example, everybody talks about the incredible game when England went to Brazil and John Barnes scored that phenomenal goal we all know about. But the man of the match was Mark Chamberlain, who is the father of Oxlade-Chamberlain, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, who plays for Arsenal and England. Now, he was, like Garth Crooks, from Stoke, the Potteries. You know, not the cleverest area in the world to be, and not somewhere where there's an abundance of black families and black social life, etc., etc., etc. So on the good days, it was hooray, begrudgingly. On the bad days, they got up through the glottis, the vitriol, you know, from the fans, and they had to experience. Consequently, you found that the players that came from outside London were nervous, were quiet, retiring. They weren't loud, you know, like the London players. You know, we had the mercurially talented Vince Hilaire, you know, played for Crystal Palace. One wonders why he never played for England. You know, as you came a bit further down into Coventry and Wolverhampton, you had Bob Hazel, you know, who was just a real man mountain. George Berry, another player. And what I noticed is that black players started to feature in the England under-21s, but they weren't filtering through into the national setup. For some reason, it wasn't happening. Laurie Cunningham, with the greatest reluctance, he was put into the England team, unquestionably the most flared player in the country at the time, and given direct orders. You look for Kevin Keegan and Bob Latchford when you get the ball. Never mind about going on mazy runs. Within a year, he'd been headhunted and he was playing for Real Madrid. So for me, two things. One, there has been limited progress. The only progress is that they now have these things like Kick It Out, where people are getting paid wages for doing a job. What did they ever know about racism? These people are in it. When did they ever stand up against racism? When did they take a stand? They didn't. You know, you look at the situation with the Barcelona right back, Daniel Alves, when he picked up a banana and he ate it. Do you know how long we've been eating those bananas? Because I can remember back in the 70s, that's what we did, eat the bananas. We stopped eating them when we found out that people were injecting them, you know, to throw on there and laughing and everything else, or putting them down their pants and everything else and then throwing it on there and watching them eating and laughing, who's the joke on? So in this, the most rapidly advancing technological era man has ever known, can you believe that we are celebrating a man eating a banana? Can you believe it? It's incredible. It is incredible. So what do we need now? We need, you know, Didier Drogba and Samuel Eto'o, you know, as established, world-renowned names. We need them to stand hand in hand, you know, with the great Pele. Sadly, we've lost Eusebio, who was a real champion of causes, and of course came from one of the sister countries, Mozambique, the others being, of course, Cape Verde, Angola, Sao Tome and Principe, and Guinea-Bissau. What a champion. What a champion. A face, you know, that was as matte black as Matt Black could be, who went on, you know, taking his legacy and was revered and revered and revered and revered. I'm sure there are those who might find some fault with him, but undeniably he was what he was perceived to be. Maturely talented, obdurate, you know, polite. His congratulations of Alex Stepney in the 1968 Cup final when he made that incredible save, which ultimately meant Benfica were defeated, is revered, just absolutely revered. And it made him, in the minds of people, did they say, oh, this big nigger, you know, Eusebio? No, they said, what a player. What a player. He was somebody they had to fear. Man's motivated by two things, or one of the two things: fear, greed. Fear or greed. If people are hungry for you, they want you to come to their club. If people fear you, they don't want you anywhere near their club. But a lack of education in understanding would go a long way. I believe drunkenness reveals what soberness conceals. And you don't need to have alcohol to be drunk. You know, it can be a euphoric state. But one thing's for sure, it takes you out from behind the veneer. All these closet people, you know, and secretly this is what they really are. So if I'm playing football and someone says, you idiot, I'll do something clever. End of the argument. You know, if I do something, if I lose the ball, it can be deemed to be idiotic. But you don't need to tell me I'm a black idiot. You know, you don't need to, equally, you don't need to tell me I'm a fat idiot. You don't need to tell me I'm a ginger idiot. You don't need to tell me, whatever it is. That's not what it's, and I know the game's full of passion, but excuse me, we've got a guy, this Jeremy Clarkson, I don't understand. I do not understand. We have a guy here who is reciting racist poems, which used to be the everyday here. But of course, through progress, no longer are. Although, it's like a policeman wearing on his uniform the National Front or the British Movement or some racist party badge. And whereas once he put it on here and didn't give tuppence what anyone thought, Now he's been told, don't wear it, so he's got it behind there. You know, what I'm saying here is racism, for racism to be ended, it takes commitment from both sides, because there are only two sides. There is a racist and there is a normal person. A racist is a psychologically weak person who has to resort to bullying tactics for his own self-satisfaction. And some people are dependent like drugs on that self-satisfaction. Don't blame me, blame somebody else. Anything in my life that is good, I thank God. Anything that's gone wrong is 100% my own fault. You know, I ask myself, if John Terry had gone up to Anton Ferdinand after the game and said to him, oh, what was I thinking about? Anton, you've known me since we was kids. I don't deny what I said, of course I said it. But it was one of them, listen, if you've been fat, I'd have said fat. It was one of them, you know exactly what it is. Call me an idiot, but I never meant to offend you. I just meant to rile you up, sledging, or whatever you want to call it. I wanted to psychologically unhinge you. That's all I wanted to do. You know, it's one of them, look, give me any forum you like, I'll apologise. An apology is an apology, it's not limited. Unlike this pig of a man, Ron Atkinson, who tries to gain credit, I was the first to bring black players in the team. Hello? Those players were in the team because they were better than anything you'd ever encountered. And what's more, two of them had nothing to do with you bringing there. They were the best in your squad and you played them. And by the way, West Ham, 5 years before you, had played 3 black players in a game. Clive Charles, Clyde Best and Eddie Coker, who actually scored twice when he came into the team. I worry going forward that the opportunities that they were given, and talking of Ron Atkinson, you know, he should be forgiven because he didn't realise the microphone was on and the camera was still running. This is surely a joke. Surely a joke. What I do wonder, going on that, he was in a TV studio. No one complained about it, so why aren't they also sacked? Why so they're all agreeing this hush, hush, hush. 2 or 3 people that were in there are still healthy in the game today. And as long as all this exists, we're going to continue to have the problems. It's not racism, really, when you think about it. It's supremacy. When people are supercilious and they deem you to be subservient, and it's only when this subservience is not forthcoming that you have some protest. But this protest is almost preconceived and from a racist perspective, is predetermined. And the consequence for that is readiness to react to it. So before you can jump up and say, you know, what you've just done is racist, oh God, you're moaning again. Why don't we just move on? Why don't we just move on? Of course I'm not a racist. Black people live next door to me. If I was a racist, I'd be breaking their windows down. I'd be doing their cars. No, excuse me, why are you saying that? If you were a racist, you live next door to me, you wouldn't have a chance to break my windows. I'll tell you, I'd move you out the street. Believe you me, it's different people today. It is different people. But it takes, going full circle, a willingness to commit to a truth and reconciliation for anything. Football is politicised today, hugely influential. I've been very fortunate. Twice I've been to the African Union, or the AOU as it was called before, to address the member heads of state on the importance of investing in sport, because one sporting icon is worth more than 100 diplomatic missions. And it's lasting, it's enduring. If you have an Olympic champion, it will be recognised for years and years and years and years and years. And I'd like to think something positive came out of it. I don't know if it did. I have no idea. But I would go and say the same thing today. But until enough like-minded people come together and we're big enough to tell people like, you know, kick it out. Kick it out have never, ever made a phone call to me, ever. They've never written to me. I have something to say. You know, I have all these firsts. I was the first to do this, and this. Yet nobody is hearing a word. Only by my demonstrations to others am I even being noticed. And I don't want no bandstand to stand up on. I just want to know that for my kids and my kids' kids, it's going to be rewarding.